Hi and welcome to another Ask GMBN Tech. Get your questions in the comments underneath. Use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech, and if they're good questions, we'll put you on the next show. Right, first up is from Avanish, and it says, "Hey Doddy, does stopping power decrease as your wheel size increases? I noticed that my old bike, 27.5 with 2-piston Tektro brakes and 160/180 rotors, stopped significantly quicker than my new bike, a 29er with the same brakes and rotors. Is it just me or is it real?" Okay, there's a few factors at hand here. The first one is the bigger wheels have more inertia. So you need, to get the same braking power, you need bigger rotors. You're not getting a power decrease as the wheel size increases. It's just the fact is that much bigger. Think about it, it's almost like leverage, isn't it? So the inertia you have requires bigger rotors, which is why it's really common to see 180 upwards, even 200mm rotors on sort of trail and enduro bikes with 29-inch wheels. They need the same or similar braking power as you get on downhill bikes, in fact. Also, there's some other things at hand. So on a 29-inch wheel bike, your bottom bracket is lower than the wheel axles, okay? It's not like it's any lower than it would be on a 27.5-inch wheel bike. It's just on a 27.5-inch wheel bike, your axles are lower down to the ground, so it effectively feels like your bottom bracket is higher, if that makes sense. Now, because of that, your bottom bracket being lower than the wheel axles, effectively, when you're braking, you're actually pushing a different part of the tyre into the ground. With a higher bottom bracket, arguably, you're loading up the front wheel more so you can actually scrub off a bit more speed on certain terrain. Now, something with 29-inch wheels, yeah, they don't slow down as fast regardless of the size of disc rotor you use because of the inertia that the wheel carries. So this is a reason why a lot of racers are liking the size wheels, because of the fact they carry more speed and they're able to control that a bit more. But for other riders, it can be a bit terrifying at times when you're trucking along somewhere and you're hard on the brakes, and it won't necessarily be a brakes not being good enough, it's just the fact that your wheels make it a lot harder on the brakes. So you can do things about this. You can put 4-pot brake on the front, 4-pot brake on the rear, bigger rotors. All these things are going to help you have more braking power. But yeah, so your observations are kind of right, but not quite, if that makes sense. Hope it does. Next up from David Topic. Doddy, loving the show, great as always. Question, could you pair Fox 38 stanchions and Rockshox Zeb lowers? I know you'll have to be some sort of guru, but is this somehow possible? I can't imagine it's possible to do that. There's going to be different spacings between them. There's going to be different machinery done on, like the Fox forks, for example. Their top cap system is totally different to the Rockshox ones. The internal sizing, where the circlips go to hold the cartridges inside the legs there. Nah, it's not going to be possible. That said, I'm sure there is some sort of Fox Rockshox hybrid that someone's made at some point where the size is just fluked being the same. But nah, you can't do that. Next up is from Bear Grylls. Are you the real Bear Grylls? And how many bears would Bear grill if Bear Grylls could reel bears? What are your thoughts on bars that advertise vertical compliance? Isn't that the function of the suspension? Is it because of a shortcoming in high-speed bump sensitivity in the forks? Okay, so forget the forks and stuff out of here. Yes, you can get handlebars like this. So there's two major styles on the market. So there's the fast bars that are actually a suspension handlebar. Now, to me, they look terrifying, if I'm completely honest. But they come from the motocross world, and they seem to be quite popular in the motocross world. And I've heard only good things about them if you ignore the terrifying price tag associated with them. So yes, arguably vertical compliance and handlebars is a good thing. Now think about how your suspension works. There's other things that actually are going to work before that, and other things that are going to transmit shock to you, so the suspension is not going to be able to absorb. So tyres, your first port of call. Getting your tyres at the correct tyre pressure is going to do more than your suspension is going to do initially, because of the fact your tyre is the first point of contact on the ground, and they're far more sort of malleable to the terrain with what's going on. And then of course there's all the other things to take into equation. So shock transmitted through your rims. If you had really stiff rims, that shock is going to get transmitted through the suspension and it's still going to make it through to you. If you've got really stiff frame, really stiff fork, it's all going to come through the handlebars. You can definitely feel this. And there's other handlebars on the market as well. So there's a brand called Spank that make a bar, I think it's called a Vibro Core, and it's essentially got like a special type of foam injected on the inside. Again, this is something that comes from the moto world. You can get this with rims as well. And the idea is that this foam core on the inside absorbs vibration, or it tries to take away vibration. If you imagine like trying to hold onto a jackhammer, it's going to be vibrating like crazy whatever happens. It's kind of what your mountain bike does. Now there's going to be an element of suspension that can help this, but nothing is going to remove that from the bike. You can help dampen it out, so vertical compliance is a good thing. Now think about, I don't know, best example would be Whistler Bike Park, A-line in the middle of summer when there's 1,000 people riding the park every day. Think of the braking bumps, it's chatter. There isn't a suspension system on the market that can keep up with that. It's just not possible for a suspension to track the ground that fast, but also offer the damping qualities and capabilities needed for other elements. You just can't have that. So that's why you just feel that vibration that's coming through. So if you can remove that with handlebars, I think that's a pretty good thing. I've yet to try either of those suggestions I talked about, but I would be keen to know if it does make a difference out there. Next up, Francis D. Hey Doddy, is it a good idea to use ceramic bearings on your bike because of corrosion? Okay, well you're starting to see ceramic bearings in certain applications. You're seeing them on wheels and hubs, which kind of does make sense to a degree. You wouldn't want to see them, I wouldn't have thought, on suspension applications because the bearings never really do a full rotation. And that's what you kind of need to get the best out with things like ceramic. Your bearings only move a small amount, which is why, in fact, some brands use bearings on the rockers that will move more, and on the ones that move less, like DW Link, for example, they'll use bushings instead. Ibis do that, and I think pretty sure a few other brands do the same thing. So, no, in that case, I'm pretty sure Ceramic Speed have been doing rear jockey wheels or guide wheels, pulley wheels, whatever you want to call them, with ceramic bearings, which I think would make quite a difference in terms of friction in your drivetrain. So I do think ceramic bearings do have legs, but bearing in mind how much friction we have in other areas of mountain biking, I'm not convinced that that's going to be the best cost-effective way to make your bike feel faster. Think about the surfaces you're riding on. You know, your tyre pressure, your tyre compound, the weight of your bike, the weight of your wheels, all those things are going to do way more than running, I'd say, than running ceramic bearings. In the road world though, complete opposite, I think. Apparently very popular. Next questions, I didn't say who it's from actually. ICC83, interesting name there. Why do XC bikes have flat bars? Is it the Lycra shorts slowly making them think like roadies? Well, to be fair, they've had flat bars for pretty much from the beginning. You've got to bear in mind that cross-country bikes is all about the pedalling efficiency. Being able to get the power down as fast as possible, being able to minimise the stress from getting out of the saddle to in the saddle, which is why a lot of the time they have slacker seat angles than you would see on modern enduro and trail bikes, for example. Yeah, it's all about the pedalling, and really it gives them the best position. And yes, a low frontal position, a smaller frontal position will make a difference on that style of riding, and it suits the bikes, to be honest. It doesn't mean you have to do that. A lot of people run riser bars on cross-country bikes. You know, it is a personal preference thing, but the racers will always stick to what works for them. Now, also, there's another thing at hand here, and this is also the reason why some of those racers are running slightly smaller bikes. So Sam Gaze, for example, he's a massive dude, and I would have thought he'd run a size XL bike, but in the past I've seen some of his bikes that have been size large, and he's running a huge stem. I forget what it was, but it's like a -17, like negative rise, if that's the thing, on his stems. And the stems, I think, are about 130mm, maybe 140mm long, or something crazy. The sort of stem length you used to see in the 90s. But it works for him because he can get in a really low position, and also it makes a transition for riders like him between his mountain bike and his road bike far more similar. So they're not basically using new muscles, they're basically using their bodies in the exact same way between the two bikes. It makes complementing their training a lot better and a lot easier. That said, on my cross-country bike, I run my stem a little bit higher, got a couple of spaces under it. I've got a flat bar on there, but it's an extremely wide bar. My position's a bit more aggressive, but it is still a cross-country bike. I just want to be able to get off that and go onto my trail bikes and feel a bit more normal, I guess. So kind of similar vein to the cross-country racers using their road bikes. I think that's fair to say. Next up is from Laszlo. I have a 140mm travel Rockshox 35 Silver TK Solo Air, and I'm struggling with brake dive. So I add air, but then I lose a small bump sensitivity. Is there anything I can do upgrade-wise to help with this? Okay, so that's got a turnkey adjustment on there. I think you're fairly limited. I don't think you can fit tokens in that fork. I don't think you can change low speed compression or even a compression adjustment as such on it to keep it up. Unless you could get a suspension tuner to do something to that fork, I don't think there's an adjustment that's going to benefit you for it. Not that I can think of anyway. I will ask some people for you, but I'm pretty sure you're very limited with that fork. Your best bet would be to just enjoy the fork for what it is and have to put up with those traits, adjust your riding perhaps around that, or run the fork firmer and deal with the lack of sensitivity that you're unfortunately going to get from a harder fork, or start saving for a slightly better fork or something you're going to be able to upgrade and adjust the internals on there. If anyone else has got any more information on the 35 Silver TK Solo Air, please feel free to let us know in the comments underneath. But I don't think you can with that, and I hate to say that because I love to try and give positive advice. Sorry. Okay, next up is from Ethan. I'm confused by the comment that bigger wheels lower your BB, as the tyres are the only contact point with the ground. If your axles are further from the ground, why wouldn't that raise everything on your bike also? Or is it a difference in frame design depending on wheel size? Yeah, okay, so they don't raise your BB and your BB doesn't get lower because of all this. So just think about this. Your bottom bracket height is pretty universally accepted to be a fairly similar height depending on what the bike is. But you think about where your wheel axles are on 27.5 or 26 or 29-inch wheels. On a 26-inch wheel, your wheel axles are closer to the ground. Yeah, so the equivalent bottom bracket height is going to be higher in relation to those. Whereas on a 29-inch wheel bike, your wheel axles are going to be much higher off the ground because of the size of the wheels. But to keep your bottom bracket at the right height to make the bike handle as it should do, your bottom bracket is going to be much lower on the bike. It's not lower as a number, but it's lower in relation to your wheel axles. This is why on a 29er bike, you feel like you're in the bike rather than on it, like you can have with a 26-inch wheel bike. Now, growing up riding 26-inch wheel bikes, I was always on the biggest size bikes. Now, a 26-inch wheel bike in an extra large frame, you can feel really perched, really high up, and actually to a degree quite vulnerable when you're riding the bike. You feel a bit all weeble wobble. It's not a nice situation. It's why when I first tried a 29er, despite the fact I actually found them grotesque to start with, because frame designs were just, designers hadn't figured it out basically. The early 29ers, some of them were disgusting. But once I rode the bike, and I sort of got my head around that bottom bracket, which felt like you're riding a really slammed bottom bracket, except it may not be any higher than what you've ridden on your previous bike. The feeling is amazing. It feels like you're in the bike. It's really, really stable. Like, that really is the biggest reason why I like 29-inch wheels on bikes. It's the position I have in that bike. It makes me feel like the bike fits me. It makes me feel like I'm riding, like I'm a smaller rider riding a bike, rather than being a taller rider and being on the bike. It's a really, really good feeling. So yeah, this could be called or referred to, rather than BB height, I've just said, as BB drop. BB drop will be measured from your wheel axles. BB height would be measured from the ground up. Some manufacturers quote drop, some quote height. This is why it's a confusing topic, but that's really it. So yeah, bigger wheels don't lower your BB. Your BB is just lower in equivalent to where those wheel axles are. Next up is from Roberts. Torii, I've been wondering how much damage does muck on stanchions do to forks? I've seen rubber covers on old mountain bikes and dirt bikes. Why are they no longer used? Okay, so on older mountain bike forks, the seals were hopeless. So manufacturers did anything possible to try and keep muck out. But the irony was, you'd actually hold muck in, because of that era, I think people have the mentality that, oh look, my fork's protected, so therefore I don't need to maintain it. But if you pulled those rubber boots up, you'd find underneath there's loads of mud on them. Now, I made a video a while back on ways you're destroying your mountain bike, and I showed a load of examples in the video. In fact, there might be some shots on screen of fork stanchion wear. Yeah, so if you get mud and muck in your forks and you're not maintaining them, that happens to your forks, and that's basically a written off fork. I don't need to say how expensive even a budget suspension fork is. They're a serious amount of money, so you need to look after your forks. Now, running suspension boots on them, if you're a good person at maintaining your fork, then arguably for winter riding they could be a good thing, but I would steer clear of them personally, because I think they can harbour the mud, and when you're cleaning your bike it could be all too easy just to miss that area on the bike. But if you're meticulous, yeah, then maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's worth trying. And that's about it for this week's Ask GMBN Tech. If you've got any more questions, get involved in those comments, and we'll see you on another show soon. Take care now. See you later.